what actually seems to be the news out of the government, and there's a lot of moving parts here, is that there was a technical reshuffle on who oversees whom. So the DOJ now has jurisdiction over Alphabet and Apple, and the FTC is now overseeing Amazon, and I guess they're overseeing Facebook. There we go. Thank you, PG, for the graphic. So this is what's happening, right? This is how things have changed in terms of, who can take a look at whom. But this is being interpreted by the market, I think, because of sentiment and because this has been a background fear for a long time as the beginning of the end for this tech era as we know it. Now, that may or may not be true, but I do think that on the substance of what we're hearing today about how this government wants to treat these companies, we're seeing an outsized reaction, at least in terms of what the news appears, as far as I can tell, to have really called for.
I was looking at the chart. These things are really swirling the ball here, but rightfully so. They were richly valued going into this bout of turbulence. Now you have this headline news, which really smacks at the investing thesis on let's say the FANG stocks. The past 10 years, you haven't had regulation really play any role. You haven't had these type of headlines, I would say, since Microsoft was getting its headlines, potential breakup. And
we were talking about that earlier, where it's like, let's assume this takes a few years. So call it 2024, 2025, that we could actually, we'll probably have a different president by then, but 2024 we'll definitely have a different president. A lot of new politicians, finally get some folks on the Hill. It's going to be 30 years from that point since Bill Gates was sitting there on Capitol Hill. So it's been, 4 presidents, several generations of senators. It's about time that we have some, kind of stomach for this stuff in Washington.
Well, and the remedy, if you want to go back and make the comparison, and you're not the first person to be bringing that up today, because back in 2000, there were 4 stocks that really took this market to new highs, the 4 horsemen. Here we're talking about 4 stocks again. Government intervention coming in right before, what happened before it was a leg down, is that the story this time. Now, with the government the last time, the remedy was not to break up a company. Again, these are very early days. We don't even know what they're really looking at in terms of the reporting. Maybe there's sort of the most on Google, but there's no suit filed. This is just kind of laying the groundwork right now, right?
Absolutely, but if you're reading the tea leaves here, this is why you want to potentially rotate out of some of these FANG stocks into names like a Salesforce, which is getting absolutely crushed today. The cloud services play, they are still going to benefit from everything you're seeing in the FANG, but they're unlikely to be attacked by regulators, at least in my lifetime.
But so I think that, Sozzi, if you look at the action, just pulling up some software names here. Workday down 6% right now. Zendesk is down 7%. Autodesk is down 4%. The kind of your core SaaS plays, Salesforce print tomorrow after the bell, they're down 5% today. So I think that kind of speaks to maybe the idea that it's sentiment as much as anything that's driving the action. Like, maybe there is a story here in terms of how regulation is changing for these names, but perhaps it is, in fact, just a headline that's kickstarting sentiment in a way, right? If you look at kind of Trump's initial trade, kind of kickstarted the vol explosion we saw at the beginning of May, that kind of dynamic.
Right, because what if you are a Salesforce and you're looking at a deal in a few years? Is there going to be the same appetite for companies to grow bigger and bigger if our biggest companies are under a microscope?
I would say if you're a Salesforce, Salesforce has been built on acquisitions. So I think for them, they will still be allowed to make acquisitions. But I think to Myles' point, overall, the NASDAQ entered correction territory, and these are the ultimate momentum, sentiment-driven names. I think people are just selling for the sake of the fact that the NASDAQ entered correction territory.